Alrighty. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the GCPSA Fall Seminar Research Series, our Research Seminar Series, sorry. So I have a few friendly reminders for all of you before we get started with Allan's presentation. First, there is going to be the GCPSA Welcome Day is going to start at 3 p.m. today here in the auditorium, and there will be food provided. So you guys should definitely all join us. We are also going to be putting up a QR code after Allan is finished presenting so that you guys can give him any kind of evaluations or feedback from his presentation. And as you already know, there's free pizza for lunch today. So without further ado, today's speaker is Allan Busuulwa. So Allan is a Ugandan graduate student in the Department of Entomology and Nematology at the University of Florida under the supervision of Dr. Sriyanka Lahiri. At the core of Allan's academic pursuits lies his research, which primarily revolves around enhancing the effectiveness of augmentative biological control agents for managing strawberry pests with a keen eye for the intricate complexities of these ecological systems. Beyond his immediate research focus, Allan's true passion within the realm of entomology lies with a particular group of insects known as the Acari. His fascination with these tiny creatures drives him to explore their secrets, contributing to a deeper understanding of their diverse roles in agricultural ecosystems. So today, Allan will be presenting his seminar titled An Introduction to the Acari and Their Multifaceted Impact on Plants.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. Today, I'm going to introduce all of you to the Acari. I know a lot of people here talk about their research, but in this realm, I just want to talk about this exciting group that I've gotten to know over the last 2 years and what has fascinated me about it. So to start, I'd like to first acknowledge a few people. So I'd like to acknowledge my lab, the Small Fruit Entomology Lab here at GCREC, and thank them for keeping up with me, with my mites and all the contaminations that I go through and everything running around. Secondly, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Alexandra Ravinci and Dr. Daniel Carrillo down at the Tropical Research Education Center because they've helped me a lot on this acarology journey, pointing me in the right direction and giving me material and a few techniques to use. So with that, I would like to just dive right into this topic. So this is going to be more of an informative session where we're going to learn about the diversity in mice and what they cause in plants. So what are the Acari? So Acari are technically insects, but more exciting than normal insects. They're really small. They can range from 100 micrometers to 500, although there are some that are over 600. So here I have, if I can get my pointer working. Here I have, I think it's a penny, right? Or a cent, it's a penny. Yes, and this penny in diameter is 19 millimeters. So just imagine if I just pick up the biggest Acari that I have here, which is of 500 micrometers. In 1 millimeter, we have 1,000 micrometers. So how many of them can I fit along the diameter of this penny? Who can do that quick math? Anyone? Yeah, approximately 36. Approximately 36 of those tiny mice, just lining them up here on this line, so or on this penny. So that tells you how small these things are. And because they're small, they pretty much go unrecognized until they cause problems. So here I have a picture of a flat mite here. This was taken by a friend of mine up at USDA ARS in Maryland, Dr. Nola Ochoa. And this one here is actually a very interesting mite that was recently discovered, and they linked it to the Chinese New Year. So this was actually described by Sam Bolton. So people who work with FDACs, you know, Sam Bolton, he's the acarologist there. So I have a few pictures to show you the beauty that lies within this group. The first picture here is actually a spider mite, an unknown species. And over there, I have the red spider mite. Can anybody volunteer to read the name here? I know the names keep a few people away, but who can give it a try? Huh? Yes, you have it. Exactly. And this one is really important, especially in coniferous plants. So if you love Christmas trees, that is one of the biggest problems that they have. Then here, I have a mite called Tenipalpus havai. So this one here is actually the Brazilian, it's the Brazilian rubber tree mite. And if you go to Brazil, this is one of the major problems that that they have. If I can just give me a minute to change this pointer here. Okay. So the other one that I have over there is kind of unique in its own way. Any volunteer to read the name? I can help you with the direction. Any volunteer to read the name? Good point. Good point. Any entomologist in the group? Or any Brazilian, especially any because this is from Brazil. This is actually from Brazil. Exactly. And the interesting thing about this mite, it was recently described again by USDA ARS up in Maryland, and they call it the sailing mite. And what it does is that it rides the winds between the savanna trees of Brazil, and it carries a lot of fungi and bacteria on it. So there's a particular group of mites that are known to just carry fungi, and they're a pain for plant pathologists because they think they're controlling the fungus, but the mite actually carries the spores and takes them to the other plants. But again, mites have it all, even to a point where they're copying dinosaurs. So this was a really recently discovered species and described. So it was named after, which dinosaur is this one? Spinosaurus, exactly. And it has a striking resemblance. So this is a flat mite, Tenipalpus spinosaurus, hence the name, recently described. So you can see that although they're small, they carry a lot of similarity with bigger organisms. So to get into it a little bit more, here I want to compare the normal insects that people see versus the Acari. So the kingdom is the same, the phylum is the same, just that when you get to the subphylum, this is where we have the mites going to Chelicerata, and then we have over there the Hexapoda. Any entomologists who can tell us the difference between these two, the biggest difference between these two?
Number of legs.
Exactly. It's the number of legs. And as we're going to see in the next slide, I will appreciate where that difference comes from. So the class is Arachnida, and then for the normal insects, we go to Insecta, and then they take another route. And then in Arachnida, we have a subclass called the Acari. So this is what my talk is going to be about, this particular group. And here is a very good picture that can tell the differences. Some of the major differences, you'll see that in the mites, over here, we have two major body parts. We have the Ganthosoma and Idiosoma, while in other insects, we have head, thorax, and abdomen, three body parts. The other striking difference you'll see is actually the number of legs. Insects only got 6, but God was like, mice are way cooler, so he gave them an extra pair. You can see we have 8 legs. So those are some of the main striking differences that you'll see. So to go into the nitty-gritty of this group, the Acari, we actually divide it into two major suborders that are really important for us. We have the Parasitiformes, and if you hear Parasitiformes, they're mainly parasites. And then we have the Acariformes. And the orders of those groups that are most important, for example, in the Parasitiformes, we have Mesostigmata. So Mesostigmata actually has important families for biological control. So anybody that uses predatory mites, they're in the Phytosidae family, so very important group. While on the other hand, the Acariformes have this notorious, let me just get my pointer here to guide us. This notorious suborder, Prostigmata. And Prostigmata has a variety of families that cause a lot of problems in plants. Any plant that you can think about probably has a mite affecting it. So some of the major families in this group, we have Tetronychidae, we have Tenuipalpidae, we have Tarsonemidae, and we have Aerophidae. And these are mainly plant feeders. They feed on plants, causing economic damage. And for the talk of today, I'm going to center on this particular group. And I'm going to try and touch base on all of the 4 major families that we at least see affecting plants here in Florida. So if you look at the host range or the diversity of plants they can affect, those 4 groups can range from specialists like the gall mites, aerophioid mites, then we have the flat mites, while the spider mites and broad mites are more generalists. Spider mites are actually notorious. You can almost find them on any plant around here at the center. However, there are very many exceptions that exist between that classification. And their life cycle is actually diverse. Each mite has its own techniques of how it does its things. So up here, I have the 2-spotted spider mite, and what you can see is that we have the egg, and then the larvae has 6, the 6-legged larvae. It goes to a protonymph, deutonymph, and then adult. While the aerophioids do something different. They have the egg, the larvae, the nymph that then goes to the adult. Here, the tarsonamids do something extra. They have the egg that hatches into a larvae, then the nymph, then the male has to carry that around, mate, and then you get the adult. So each kind of family has its own strategy of a life cycle. But things get interesting when you look at dispersal. How do these mites really move from one place to the other? Most people are familiar with spider mites. They form the web, walk on the web, colonize the entire field. That is true. But then there is another exciting mode of transportation. So for smaller ones that cannot really walk fast, they have to find a way to move, and they hitchhike on other insects. For example, here, I believe this is a psyllid here. What you can see on the body of the psyllid here, you have this tiny yellowing here, and those are actually aerophioid mites. And this mode of transport is actually called foracy. So you hitchhike on another person who can fly or walk faster than you, so you can get from one plant to the other. So very diverse, very different ecologies are well adapted to feed on plants. So the most important mite families, at least in Florida, that I've come across are the spider mites, in other words, Tetranychidae, the flat mites, where we have the red palm mite that I'll talk about, and some of them that vector plant pathogens. We have the broad mites, those are tarsonamids, and I know in strawberries we have that as a big of a pest, and then we have the aerophioid mites. These have to be one of my favorite mites because of what they do to the plant. I know it's bad, but it's good when you look at it. I mean, in my own opinion. So this photo was actually taken by me, and this is the 2-spotted spider mite, very famous in strawberries and in tomatoes and all other cropping systems. So to talk about this group, particularly the spider mites, in other words, Tetranychidae, generally speaking, in general, they produce webbing, but not all spider mites produce webs. There are a few exceptions. So there are so many species in this group, over 1,200 described species. Every year when you revise the literature, there is some new species that has been described. Most of them are now coming out of Brazil, and other parts of, many parts of Asia. They have a really wide host range. You almost find them on anything. If you take a walk, especially in the summer, into the fields, you'll even find them on grasses, just surviving. And what they do is, when they feed on the plant, they create these chlorotic spots that we're going to see in the next slide. And they prefer hot and dry conditions. That's why during the summer here, we'll get a lot of calls because people are seeing them in their greenhouses and they are like, oh my God, how can I get rid of them? It's just the summer. Remember, they just love that hot and dry conditions. In a greenhouse, that is perfect. If you have tunnels, perfect for them. So they generally live on the underside of the leaf. And the reason for why they live underside the leaf is because they don't really like a lot of light because of the UVC that is in the light. So they tend to hide underneath the leaf. And here I have a few pictures. This is the picture that we saw previously of the 2-spotted spider mites. Here I have a picture of the 2-spotted spider mite eggs. Don't they look good? The eggs, these round structures here. And then this picture was taken by USDA ARS, and it shows you what a low temperature scanning electron microscope can do. So it brings out this beauty of the mite. It really shows you what this mite looks like. And you can actually appreciate the 2 spots here and here. And if you go here, you actually see them here and here. And you can see all these hairs called the CT, and they're really important in identification. We use them a lot to identify mites. So if you do a quick Google search of spider mites on plants, this is what you're going to see. I've kind of broken it down. We have the damage on a bean leaf. This is from my colony of my two-spotted spider mites. And you can see these spots that they're causing, as I talked about in the previous slide, chlorotic spots. These are the chlorotic spots. And this is kind of uniform throughout all the plants that they infest. So for example, people who have roses at home, in the summer, you look at the roses, you see this, spider mites. Our tomato breeders, I've seen this in a field, but it was abandoned. So again, spider mites. Strawberries, this is really common in strawberries, especially in the greenhouses. And even on citrus, I've seen them on citrus plants in some greenhouses, and even hops that we're trying to bring to Florida. This pest already feeds on hops. To continue, watermelon. You'll always find them on watermelon. Even bamboo. I know that bamboo is becoming something big in Florida. So that's something to watch out for. Hemp, if you go to the Tropical Research and Education Center, they had a hemp field there. You'll still find these spider mites on there. The marigolds, you'll find them on. And people who love ornamentals, croton, trust me, in the summer, you'll find spider mites on there. So to conclude this group, some of the most important ones in Florida, like I said, we have the two-spotted spider mites, Tetranicus urticae, the avocado red mite. I've seen this in the Tropical Research and Education Center. They have an extensive plantation of avocados, and you'll find this here and there. So the avocado red mite, and then we have the citrus red mite. So if you have citrus plants in a greenhouse, I can be 100% sure that you'll find that mite there. I've seen it here at the center, that mite right there, infesting citrus plants. And then we have the Glover mite, Tetranicus gloveri. This is I've not yet seen this here, but I know in Miami it's readily available. So now we can move on to the next exciting group. I mean, it's exciting, but it causes a lot of issues. The flat mites, and that's what they are. They're just flat. They're just flat mites. So they're really slow moving. That's the first thing. Secondly, they actually feed at the midrib. If you take a leaf that has flat mites, you'll see them feeding at the midrib. And then they do not produce webbing. They are not spider mites, and they do not produce webbing. If you go in the literature, you'll see them being called false spider mites. They're not spider mites, they're flat mites. So some of them actually vector very many viruses. For example, Brevipalpus yosterci that vectors the citrus leprosis. And then Rollia indica is just unique because of the way it came to Florida. That's how I came to know about it and what has been done in research to kind of control it. Here I have a picture of a flat mite, again from USDA ARS in Maryland, from Dr. Ron Ochoa. It's a really beautiful looking mite, right? So just to show you the beauty of this mite, I have some more pictures. So right here, you have the flat mite. This is, when you look at it from the top and when you look at it from the side, then this here is this part here magnified. And you can see the legs, right? Very many. Each leg has like minute small legs for walking. And then you have the sensory city here. So it has a lot of adaptations to actually live on the plants that it's going to live on. And I'm going to talk about a few cases. So let's begin with citrus. So if you look at Brevipalpus yosterci that is infecting citrus, and you look at, the damage it's causing, what you kind of see is that this is no damage. And as it continues feeding, you kind of see this progression until the leaf actually looks like this. But this is not the bad part of it. The bad side of it is that it causes citrus leprosis, or it vectors citrus leprosis virus that causes citrus leprosis. So this is how it looks like at the beginning, photo number 1. And then as it advances, the fruit turns to that. And if you're selling citrus, for if you're selling citrus for open market, consumers looking at this, they'll probably not like it. And actually, it also happens in the leaves. You can actually see these chlorotic lesions on the leaf that turn to this kind of dark dark spot. It actually also goes on the stem. This is the beginning of how it looks. And then when it gets worse, it looks like that. It looks like it looks like if the wind blows really hard, the stem can actually break and you can lose the entire plant. And if you look at this is what the lesions of the leaf look like on the upper side, and this is what they look like on the underside. So for people who love ornamental plants, yes, we have one flat mite that will be a nightmare. Tenepalpus pacificus, and what this does, especially in greenhouses, is that it loves orchids. Here I have a picture of various varieties of orchids, and this mite was consistently found on all those varieties of orchids. And in Florida, in greenhouses, this is one of the major pests. And if you have orchids laying around your house, most probably you'll find this mite. So the other mite in this group that I would like to talk about is actually the red palm mite. This is a very interesting mite that has been studied extensively. So this is the damage it causes. So picture number one here is how the damage looks like. But when you zoom in into that, you can actually see this mite here on here. So this is what a healthy plant looks like. And this is what it looks like when it's being fed on by this mite. And again, here I have a healthy plant, and here I have an infested plant. And actually, it can kill entire coconut plants. So there was a paper, actually, there is a paper where they used the Landsat for remote sensing to just detect the movement of this mite. And they could clearly see the movement of this mite, into Florida. You can see this part here. They could see that it's starting out and going up. So you can actually tell and see the progress using the Landsat. So that's how bad this was. So this mite actually also attacks other plants, but it mainly specializes on these palms. So now that was just a brief about that group. So the broad mites, on the other hand, is another group that I'd like to talk about. So they're really small, really small. And the first time, if you don't know them and you see them, you can think that they're fly larvae. So many of them are actually fungivorous, meaning that they feed mainly on fungi. But those that do feed on plants, what they do cause are these malformations, especially in the growing tips of the plant. And two examples that I pulled out that we have in strawberries is Polyphagotarsonemus latus, which is a broad mite, and Phytonemus pallidus, also known as the cyclamen mite. And here I have a picture of the male carrying the ferret female. So this is an adaptation to their life cycle. So the male has kind of the last pair of legs is actually modified to carry the female, and it will carry it everywhere it goes until the female develops, they mate, and then sets it loose and then finds another one. So talking about Polyphagotarsonemus latus, I have a picture that Dr. Alexander Ravinsky gave me. This is what the colony will look like, and this is when they're in high density. So one of these is actually this. This is from USDA ARS picture taken by Dr. Ron Ochoa. So you can appreciate the complexity of this mite. This is actually a female. So to give you an example of what it can feed on, it has been documented to feed on avocados, cantaloupes, chilies, citrus, cotton, eggplants, mango, papaya, tomatoes, strawberries. So in papaya, Dr. Daniel Carrillo did some research and found that this is the type of damage it causes on papaya. And if you're really studying papaya, you might actually mistake this from one of the various plants of papaya. But in strawberries, what you actually get is this kind of, you can see this kind of damage and stunting that it's causing here. And it usually feeds on the leaves that are emerging. So the other one that I'd like to talk about is the cyclamen mite, Phytonemus pallidus. So this is a female here, and you can see the male with its modified hind legs for carrying. And this mite has a wide host range. It can feed on up to 26 botanical families, including strawberries, grapes, so many ornamentals. If you go to any place that sells ornamentals, especially ornamentals that have stayed for a long time and you look through, you're gonna find this. So here I have a few examples of the well-documented hosts in ornamentals, these 3 plants. And in strawberries, this is where things get exciting a little bit. So they primarily feed or target the youngest leaves of the plant. And when they infest the leaves, they can show signs of roughness. So if you look at this, this is kind of, rough and it's wrinkled on the surface. And the other thing is the edges of these leaves kind of become irregular. For people who know, strawberry leaves, how healthy strawberry leaves are, they kind of become irregular. And the veins of the affected leaves actually bulge up. If you look at the veins, you see how this vein is bulging up here? So yes, and they can also infest the fruits. So this kind of bronzing here is similar to what chili thrips do. So before you move in, you have to kind of make sure that you're looking at the right thing. And if you on the fruit, where you can actually find them is the calyx of the fruit. This is what it looks like. When you take the fruit and take the calyx off, you'll kind of find them on the calyx, and you can see some of them here. You have an adult here, and then you have others down here. So this is how the calyx will look in heavy infestation. So this is, in strawberries, we grow strawberries here, but I'd like to call your attention to another member of this family of mites that is economically important worldwide. And that is Tarsonemus spinking. I first came across this mite in Costa Rica. And it's called the panicle rice mite that can cause 30 to 90% crop loss. It's a really huge problem in very many rice growing regions in the Caribbean, in Central America, and Asia. And it was recently reported in the United States. So now its story is being rewritten. And here I have pictures of the female here. You can see the male here, and still it has, those modifications that I talked about, the hind leg modifications, and the eggs. And the interesting thing about this mite is that it's commonly reported in conjunction with several plant pathogens. You rarely find it alone. And if you look at the damage, here you can see that, photo A here is the discolorized hulls and stems, how they look like from afar. But if you take a closer look at, at the plant, this is what you kind of see. The feeding damage here on the leaf sheets. And if you take a closer look, this kind of, the plant looks like this. And if you look inside the sheath, it will kind of have those brown, brown colorings. So this is a big problem for rice growers anywhere. And the first time it was actually reported was in Louisiana rice fields. So now going on to the last group that I'm going to talk about. I know it's a lot, but this is so far my favorite group of mites because of what they do, because of the differences in what each species does to a plant. So these ones are extremely small, very small, and they possess elongated bodies. And the difference between these mites and all the other ones is that these ones only have 4 pairs of legs. So they don't have 6 like the other mites. And they can cause, symptoms including discoloration, you can cause stunted growth, deformities in the plant, and you can form blisters, and they can create galls and abnormality growth on the host, and we're going to see some of those. So if you go into Google and put aerophioid mite damage, this is what you'll see. Look at that beauty. This is citrus here, and you can see how the fruit is deformed. These are, galls, different galls on different plants, and these galls come in all shapes, sizes, have different structures. They cause erinias here. This is a coconut. Anybody who has been to the Tropical Research and Education Center, if you look at their coconuts, this is what you'll see because of aerophioid mites. And to talk about some of those erinias that they form, here I have a picture of the different structures of, arenas that they form depending on the species. So each species has its own way of doing this. And the way they do this is that when they feed on the plant, they kind of induce the plant trichomes to develop into these structures. So this is not how a normal plant trichome looks like. So far we don't know how they do that, but I know I have a friend of mine trying to figure out what exactly they are doing. And what he's doing is he's taking saliva. He's taking saliva out of these mites. So imagine extracting saliva from them. And how you do that, he figured it out, and he's trying to figure out what they have in their saliva that makes them do or induce this kind of, deformation in plants. So this is a picture that I took of a lychee leaf that was infested, and you can see how these trichomes look after they've been fed on by airfield mites. So this is common. I've seen it here at the center too. So this is the citrus rust mite. Anybody who can volunteer to read this? Apart from the other acarologists in the room. Huh? Anybody? Yeah, you can take it bit by bit. Phylococup. Eh? Anybody? I'm kind of guiding you. Phylocop, two, ruta, olivora. Really beautiful looking mite. And once it's on citrus, it does this. So the interesting thing about aerophioids is that most of them are actually really host specific. So you won't find this mite infesting any other plant. They have just evolved to feed on one particular plant. And here I have a picture of a scanning electron micrograph of how this mite looks like. So the other nightmare of very many tomato growers is the tomato russet mite. Any volunteers? Exactly. And I got this picture yesterday. I came across it by luck, and it's in Spanish. It's actually on a website, but they bring out the damage really, really well. So they tell you síntomas iniciales en la hoja. So you're getting symptoms here that you have, and then you have necrosis of the leaf. Then you have defoliation, and then from defoliation, you have the browning of the stems. And this is how the fruits will look like when they're infested by this mite here. So I have an actual, somebody really took a good picture of this mite. I don't know which microscope they used. And here I have an electron scanning micrograph of the same mite. So something to keep in mind, especially if you're growing tomatoes here in Florida. The next case is quite interesting because it was brought to our attention by the center director. This mite here. Alitus simplex, and it feeds on, it infects Mexican petunias. So if you take this to the plant pathologists, they'll think it's some sort of powdery mildew, but it's not powdery mildew. It's actually a mite that is causing these damages on these plants here. You can see, you can see these arenas forming right here, and these are how the plants look. So these pictures were actually taken by a friend of mine and sent to me. I saw this at the mall. You know the Brandon Mall? They have a lot of flowers outside. So one time I was passing and I stopped and I was like, wait, I know that. So this is how it looks like. This is a close-up of how it looks like. So if you have Mexican petunias, probably you'll find this mite right there. But it has not been studied that well. So we know its identity, but not really a lot about its ecology and, lifestyle. The other one that I would like to bring to your attention, I discovered that, having good lawns here is a thing. So the Bermuda stunt mite, Bermuda grass stunt mite, Eriophis cynodo. Exactly. And this is actually specialized for Bermuda grass. And what you will see is, shortened internodes, stunted leaves, swollen stems. This is sign of the witch's broom. I don't know why they call it a witch's broom or who saw the witch's broom, but this is kind of the damage that it causes. You can see these stunted growths and, you're forming those bulges. So these are photos on 3 different varieties of Bermuda grass, and still this might causes the same symptoms on all of those. So I know that has been a lot of, introduction and things to take in. But I would like to just stop there for today and say thank you. And if you have any specific questions, if you want to talk about these mice, we can talk about them extensively. I know this is just a brief introduction. I just wanted to let you know that there are other things worse than actually big insects that you can see. So I can take any questions that you may have right now. Any questions about any particular group? Yes, we can start there. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
How do they feed on in the plants? Do they have human mouth marks or something?
Very good point. So it varies from group to group, but in general, and I'm generalizing here, they pierce the plant and just start sucking out. But it varies widely from group to group, but generally that's what they do. It's really hard to just generalize the feeding style because it will change. Even in the same group, you'll find mice that do different things. Yeah. That's an example. That's a well-studied example. And I have seen a lot of publications where they're trying to control those 2-spotted spider mites, and they use systemic insecticides, and the systemics don't work because they did not check how this mite feeds. So it pierces the leaf and goes into the mesophyll layer. It never digs deep to go, into the phloem where these are. So they don't work, and they're like, it doesn't work. But I'm like, no, you did not look at the feeding style. So yeah, that's a good example. Yes. Yes, you had a question?
So for control, there's a very small tail that when I was working in Mexico, we had blackberries.
Mm-hmm.
They would get really bad with dry weather, like really bad, lots of wets and everything. And if we sprayed once or twice a week, we wouldn't do anything to them. But once we started spraying like 3 or 4 times a week, we saw some progress. And it didn't matter what we sprayed. You could even, we were joking, like you could even spray just water. It seemed like that control. So as long as we keep the plant feeling for noise. How possible is that? Like you can just spray water, you just wash them down. What do you think?
Washing them down will not be an option unless you have 2 plants. But if you have thousands, that becomes a problem. So in that case, are you referring to the Tetranicus urticae, the 2-spotted spider mites?
It's 2-spotted spider mites and blackberries.
In blackberries. Okay. Yeah. So they don't really do well in humid environments. So although once it starts raining or you get anything that elevates the humidity, their numbers go down because they don't hatch as fast. So that's what you might be seeing in most cases. But the other thing I would say is resistance, and how often you're spraying really determines the effectiveness of your insecticide. So yeah, that might have been the case.
So a direct impact is in hatching.
Yeah, in hatching, and it's actually the humidity impacts the entire, lifestyle of that mite. Yeah, in different aspects. Hot, very hot and dry. What they do really.
Yeah, because hot and dry was so bad.
Mm-hmm. You bring them down. Yeah. Yes. Any other questions? And I know I didn't touch on control. Control will be another time. It's another whole group of phytosaids. That's what I work on mostly, but I also find the Phytophocus ones kind of exciting. Any more questions?
Online.
I don't see. Does anybody have a question? You can unmute yourself and. Oh yes, I see. Julia, you have a question?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, great presentation, Alan. Insects are cooler than mice in my opinion, but mice are very cool as well. And I was wondering from the groups you presented, why do you think those pests can be so polyphagous? Like what kind of like how mites can break the barriers of so many botanic families, like in their mouth part, or what do you think that they are so successful in different groups?
Okay, so Julia asked whether why do I think that these mites can infest so many botanical families? And there are very many contexts to this question. One, it has to do with the ability of the mite to feed, but most importantly, the ability of the mite to change its microbiome to be able to handle, new plant chemicals. So that's where it lies. So these mites probably have that mechanism where they can just switch the microbiome out, or they just have the right microbiome that can kind of handle most plants. Yes, Usman, you have a question?
Yes, great presentation, Alan.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I have these water hyacinth tanks that I'm rearing, but I have serious problem with the spider mites. So sometimes I try like to get like the hose and then raise them off and soap them, but they kept coming back all the time. So I don't know if there's like a best means of getting those off my plant.
Okay, thanks for that question. So I'd really have to first see the species of the spider mites you're dealing with before I can be able to tell you exactly what to do, because the general, for two-spotted spider mites, they don't like humid environments. But for those mites, I'll really have to first take a look at that particular mite before I can actually tell you how to proceed. Because hosing them off is not going to cut it.
Yeah. All right, I can send you like
yeah,
pictures. So
a picture, and I think probably I didn't talk about this, but we can look into some predators for you. You probably wouldn't need a lot, but I would need to select a predator that can actually survive on your plants at least, and high humidity. So that's something we can look into later.
that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hello, I have a question. I'm having challenges with raising my hand on the Zoom.
Okay.
So, yeah, Alan, that was a great presentation. I enjoyed it. At least I got to learn new species of mites. My question is, on some of the mites that you presented, you highlighted to say some of these mites are host to pathogens and some are host to viruses. So my question is, on your management plan, do you only target the paste or the mites rather alone, or you have an integrated management to also target, let's say, the pathogens?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So given that the insect is the one transmitting the pathogen, my first priority would be to have an integrated approach where I have clean plants to make sure that, if the insect shows up, it will not be transmitting the pathogen around, and then focus on literally, working on that pest and making sure that I see nothing. Because with pathogens is, if you have one that has a pathogen, if you have one insect that's feeding and has a pathogen, well, it spreads it to one plant, then the others feed and the story is gone. So you kind of have to approach it holistically, make sure that your plants are clean, don't have those viruses, and then double back and start controlling the mites. But yes, you focus on the insect because it's the one bringing in the problem. Thank you. I hope that answers your question. So do we have any other questions on Zoom? Okay, then I think, and the audience, well then, thank you very much for listening to me.
And I'm just going to put up for a short while the QR code for any evaluations for Alan's presentation.